I currently do not own a vacuum press for veneer work. I just don't do a whole lot of veneering yet. So what I've made here are these shop-made presses out of some 3/4 inch plywood. These platens are made out of 3/4 inch Baltic birch. They measure 8 inches wide and 7 inches long. And I've got the faces covered with packing tape so that when I'm gluing something up, it doesn't stick to the plywood. These are the cawls. They are also made out of 3/4 inch plywood. They are 2 inches wide and 7 inches long, and I've glued them to the platens. If these were larger panels that I were gluing up, I would make these cambered cawls. That way, if you put a clamp on each end, you'll get even pressure all the way across the cawl. But with my parallel clamps, I can reach all the way to the center of these with just 2 clamps, so that's not a concern. And I've placed these so that they're evenly distributed across the platens, so that way I can still get clamps along the outside and the center. And with the parallel clamps reaching all the way to the center, it gives me a nice even surface with nice clamping pressure. These are extremely simple to make, and they recommend that you don't stack more than roughly 4 sheets of veneer per shop-made press like this. So if you're going to be batching out some boxes, just make a couple sets of these. You can use some scrap plywood, and it doesn't require a whole lot of plywood for these boxes because they're nice and small. So I'm not going to show how to make these. They're extremely simple. Again, these are the platens. They're 8 inches wide, 7 inches long, and the cawls are 2 inches wide, 7 inches long, and I've glued them to the surface just using some hide glue. So go make a couple of these and then come back and we'll get started on the veneer work. Okay, before we actually move on to working with the veneer, I wanted to talk about the glues that I have in my shop. This is a Titebond cold press glue for veneer work. It's formulated to minimize bleed through, dries nice and hard, and it has a decent open time. And if it does bleed through after it's dried and you sand it off and there's some still on the surface, it won't affect your finishing. So this is a good option. Another great option are the hide glues. I've got Titebond hide glue and Old Brown glue. Again, these are great because you can use them not only on the veneer work but for the rest of the box. You can use it on the miters. And again, these are very forgiving glues, and if for some reason it does get on the surface after you've dried it, it doesn't affect your finish. So if you don't have either one of these, I recommend just picking up some hide glue because you can use it in your shop for all kinds of projects. This is more of a specialty glue for veneering, so just pick up some hide glue and use it for the veneer work. I think you'll like it. All right, so hope you have your presses made. Let's talk about flattening veneer. Depending on the type of the species and the type of cut you have of veneer, whether it's quarter sawn, rift sawn, or some sort of burl veneer like this walnut, you may potentially need to flatten it. This walnut burl is a pretty extreme case. It's really wavy and it needs to be flattened, whereas this piece of quarter sawn, I believe it is maple, is super flat. You could take this and glue it up and you'd be good to go. But then there's pieces like this sapele that's sort of wavy, and I'm not sure if I would want to risk it, that I would probably flatten it as well. But the stuff that I use to flatten the veneer is sold by veneersupplies.com. They have an excellent website with a lot of resources and learning material on there. But I use this Super Soft 2 for veneer softening. It does a great job. So there's 3 different ways that you can go about applying and softening the veneer using this product. There's one step where you can spray your veneer with the softener, let it set for about 15 minutes, come back with an iron that's on a medium setting and iron the veneer until it's dry, and that'll flatten it out. But they recommend, if you're going to do that, to use to make sure there's plenty of ventilation in the room or garage or wherever you're doing this. You don't want to breathe this stuff in if you're ironing it. One downside of ironing it straight away is it may not stay flat as long as if you were to just put it in your press and leave it in your press for a couple of days to fully dry. The second step, and which is what I do, is I spray it on there, put it in the press with some paper towels, let it set overnight, and change the paper towels every 6 to 12 hours. But let it set overnight, come back the next day, and iron it completely dry. It stays supposed to stay flatter longer than if you were just coming straight iron the piece. So that's what I like to do, is let it set overnight, come in the next day and iron it to completely dry it and then work with it. And the third step, or the third way to do it, is to put it in, spray the stuff on there, put it in your press, change paper towels every 6 to 12 hours or overnight, and let it set to completely dry in the press for 2 to 3 days. And that will keep the veneer flatter longer. Anytime that you're putting an iron to this veneer, there's going to be potential for the veneer to shrink and crack. So it all depends on what veneer you're using and how fast you need it flattened. Each lid uses 2 pieces of veneer, one for the top, one for the bottom. So I've got 2 pieces here. I got 2 sheets. So it's pretty simple. You just spray it on. And make sure you get veneer softener on the whole piece. And this product is really good. You can spray this if for some reason it doesn't come out flat enough or you can't get to the sheet in time. You can just spray some more on it and do this step again in the future. So you don't have to worry about potentially wasting your veneer. As you can see, it's starting to soak through. Just going to rub it on here a little bit. Make sure I get even coverage. Okay, so I'm going to let this set up for a few minutes before dabbing off any standing veneer softener, and then we'll put it in the press. Okay, it's been about 5 minutes, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to lightly dab the excess standing veneer softener off, just so it's not soaking wet when I put it in the press. So now, here's how we set the veneer press up. We take the one press, the bottom press, put a paper towel over it, and then put the veneer on it. And then take another paper towel, put it over that, and then make a sandwich, put the second veneer on there, and then put the final paper towel over there. And then put that on. Okay, one mistake that I made in this is I forgot to cut these to the actual size, or a little bit larger than the panel. So I've got a plywood template that's a little bit larger than my panel. I'm going to position it on here to find the best grain, and then I'm going to use my veneer saw to cut these to a more manageable size. And with the veneer saw, you would typically, of course, want to do this before you spray the softener on there, but it's no big deal. It actually probably made it a little bit easier to cut. So with the veneer saw, you want to use it like a regular saw. You don't want to go back and forth, and you want to put light pressure on it when cutting, because this veneer will rip. So let me cut these down to size, and I'll be right back. Okay, now with that out of the way, let's set our veneer press back up again. These are the more manageable sizes. And as you can tell, these are already soaked. So I'm actually going to swap that out for another one. So paper towel, veneer, another paper towel, veneer, and finally a paper towel. And now we have our sandwich. Again, with our presses with the packing tape on it. Goes on top. Now we have a more manageable piece. And then take your quick clamp. Line up your cawls. Slide it over, make sure that everything's lined up. So that looks good. Just to temporarily hold it into place, put 2 quick clamps on it. Bring my quick clamp over and hold it into place. And the final clamp. And as you can see, I didn't need to put a camber on the cawls because these quick clamps go all the way to the center. But like I was mentioning, if for some reason your panel is larger and you can't get any clamping pressure in the center, you would want to put a camber, slight camber on your cawls. And so now what I'm going to do is, it's roughly 4 o'clock, so I'm going to come out here maybe at 9 o'clock and switch these paper towels out. And then again in the morning, switch them out. And then tomorrow around this time, I'll bring it out, iron it to finish the flattening, and then we'll glue them on. It's been about 6 hours, so I'm gonna go ahead and pop this off and replace the paper towels with some fresh paper towels. The paper towels take on from the burl. It's pretty cool looking. But as you can see, the burl is really flat, but it's still wet. So I'm just going to change it out for some fresh paper towels. And you can also use the real thin newspaper type material, but of course make sure that it doesn't have any print on it, just real thin paper. Line it back up and put the clamps back on. Okay, it's been 24 hours since I put this in the press, so now I'm going to take it out and use an iron to dry it the rest of the way instead of waiting 2 to 3 days, just to speed this up a little bit. Like I was saying, I've replaced the paper towels a couple of times since yesterday, and as you can see, this is the third set of paper towels. And for the most part, it's dry, but you can still, when you feel it, it's cool to the touch and a little damp. So I've got an iron set over here on medium temp, and I'm just going to iron this down the rest of the way. And I'm actually going to just set this on top of one of the paper towels, and then I've got a cotton cloth here. This is just an old t-shirt that I'm going to set over the veneer when I iron it. Like I was saying, I got it on medium. Actually, I don't. I thought I had it on medium. This doesn't take very long to get to temp. So now I'm ready to go. And I'm going to keep this moving because I don't want to leave this on the veneer in one spot too long. I don't want to take a chance of it shrinking and or cracking. So I'm going to continue to move it around. You'll notice the veneer will start to curl a little bit. That's fine. It's because this side of it is warm compared to the other side. When you get both sides dry, it will flatten back out. But be careful when it starts to curl up to not put too much pressure, because you can wrinkle it and then go over that wrinkle and create a crease and or crack it. So once it starts to curl up a little bit, I like to flip it over and start to iron the other side. Again, being careful not to press too hard, because you may accidentally create a crease or a crack with the weight of the iron. And like I was saying, you need plenty of ventilation. I got a fan over here blowing on it, so make sure you have plenty of ventilation in the room. Crack a door, but it doesn't take too long once you start this to completely dry it out, and you'll notice that the iron or the veneer will start to flatten back out when you start to completely dry it. All right, this veneer is dried. I'm going to let it set to the side to cool off a little bit before I put any glue on it, and then I'm going to repeat the same exact methods on the second piece of veneer to get it dry. So what I have here is I'm going to go ahead and put glue on this side of the board, and it's really easy to put too much glue on here, so just put a little bit on and use an ink roller or a brush to get it around on the surface. I happen to be using just an acid brush. So now I'm going to set the veneer on here, and typically if you're only doing one side of the piece with veneer, you'd put some tape on here. But since I'm doing both sides, I can't really wrap tape all the way around to this side because I've still got to put glue and veneer on the other side. What I'm going to do is make sure that doesn't affect it too much, stays in its place, and then I'm just going to flip it over and press on it for just a second to make sure that it gets enough bond with the veneer. And then when I put this side of veneer on, I'm just going to make sure to not move it around too much to affect the veneer on the other side and to reposition it. And just a note, I did not sand this board prior to putting the veneer on it. I wanted to keep it rough so that it gives it a better bond. So this is straight out of my planer, which leaves a pretty decently rough surface. And one thing that you'll realize if you deal with burl veneer is it's so porous, you're gonna almost immediately get bleed through on this. All right, so now just double checking the bottom veneer, making sure that it doesn't have any creases or bubbles, and everything looks good. It's got even coverage. So now I'm going to put the top piece on And then again, the quick clamps on the corners. And you'll also notice, like I was mentioning, this board is actually bigger than my veneer, so it sticks out a little bit, but that's not a big deal. So now that's on, I'm going to get my parallel clamps on here, spin it around, and now that I've got all 4 clamps, I'm going to go ahead and put equal amount of pressure on each clamp, and then put the remainder of the quick clamps on the corner. And I'm going to let this set overnight. I'm not going to touch it because it's already late in the day, but if this were early in the morning, I would give this, depending on the temperature and the humidity in your shop, I would give it 4 hours roughly, but I would read the bottle and make sure because your conditions may be different from mine. But it says press time may vary from 45 minutes to 2 hours, but I would give it as much time as you can. 3 or 4 hours is what I would do. Because right now it is almost November here in Kentucky, so it's kind of chilly in here. So I'm going to give mine overnight, and I have to work tomorrow, so it's going to be well over 24 hours.